Hello, I'm Melanie McFarland, Senior Critic for Salon.com. And today I'm your host for Half Hour with Red, White, and Royal Blue. And today it's my pleasure to have a conversation with Sarah Schechter, producer of the film, along with her producing partner, Greg Berlanti of Berlanti Schechter Films. Sarah, it's so nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I would love for you to give people an overview of what Red, White, and Royal Blue is about.
Red, White, and Royal Blue is based on the New York Times bestseller book of the same name by the fabulous Casey McQuiston. And it is a love story about a closeted son of a British prince who falls in love, quite to his shock, with the son of the first female president of the United States. And hilarity and obstacles ensue.
As they do with all rom-coms, right?
Yes.
All right, so before we begin our conversation, let's watch a trailer.
I sent you to the royal wedding with simple instructions. Don't cause an international incident.
How's it going?
You've done some pretty stupid things in your day, but this...
Thanks the cake? Henry shoved me.
An urge I currently share. What I need is some good old-fashioned damage control.
The White House and the palace are going to release a joint statement.
You've got to be joking.
You can hate Prince Henry all you want.
My NDA is bigger than yours. I want you to know that. You're wearing lifts. Know that too, sweetheart.
You better act like the sun shines out of his ass and you have a vitamin D deficiency.
I thought is what you might say to convince the world that we're actually friends. I love hanging out with this guy.
These days are way too lonely.
We never have to see each other again. You're expected at my New Year's party.
Don't forget the love away, but
Did I do something wrong? Do you ever wonder who you'd be if you were an anonymous person in the world? I have no idea what you're talking about. You're as thick as it gets.
someone in love.
What I meant when I said... yourself, your majesty.
It's your royal highness.
Oh. Dear Alex, I miss you.
That's what I really want.
Good morning.
We are in a hotel crawling with reporters. If anyone sees you leave this hotel, I will Brexit your head from your body. Your Royal Highness.
You need to figure out if you feel forever about him. Do you love him?
What difference would it make if I did?
I want someone to love.
Prince Henry belongs to Britain.
I need
We can figure out a way to love each other on our own terms. It's like there's a rope attached to my chest and it keeps pulling me towards you.
someone to love me.
Hopefully we'll get through tonight without any more scandals.
The night is young, Ma.
That's what I want.
So as you were saying, this is based on Casey McQuiston's novel, and it is so beloved by readers. And I'm curious to know, did the story come to you, or did you read it and then decide that you wanted to make it into a movie?
I read the book before it was published. So before it was a bestseller, my executive, Mike McGrath, who's an executive producer on the film, read it first and kind of came into my office and was sort of like, this book is really fun. It's really good. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't even want to email you though about what it's about because it's very steamy. And I don't know if that's like proper for a work email. So I immediately read it. And then my producing partner, Greg Berlanti, also read it. And we all just loved it. And we kind of teamed up with Amazon to go after it. A lot of people are going after the manuscript, which happens often in Hollywood before books are published. You know, it's very speculative. You're betting on other people sharing your opinion of a book before it's kind of in the world. But we just loved the story and the writing and met with Casey, and the rest is history. We're very, very fortunate that they picked us to be the producers to adapt their book, which we just loved so much because there were a lot of people that shared our love.
Yes. And what was it about the story for you that really made you say, okay, I have to make this into a film?
I mean, I think that emotionally, it was just a riveting story. I think so often you're looking for a story that you feel like you haven't seen before, but that feels universal. And so to me, the story of like the obstacles that stand between two people being able to be together is, I mean, that's the stuff of so many great films, right? From the beginning of film and certain literature. So this, though, felt like a fresh spin. The stakes felt very real. They felt like real, like sometimes romantic comedies, I feel like the problems just seem like, it's like, just call each other, just talk about that. You know, it's like they don't, for me, feel genuine enough. And you want to root for a couple. You want to feel like they belong together, but there are things keeping them apart. And in this case, the stakes of world politics and privacy and responsibility to family and country, those were real stakes. Those were real problems that they had to face separately and together. So that for me was really exciting. And then intellectually, politically, I just really loved that I hadn't seen a story like this about two young men. And it was so joyful. So that was, I think, exciting for us because, you know, Greg, his entire career has been really focused on expanding the aperture of who gets to be at the center of a story. And so I think this was just a continuation of that.
We have seen this revival in rom-coms. And whenever there's a revival, there is, you know, there's a certain format to all movies, as you know. There's certain expectations of different obstacles, as you were talking about, particularly in rom-coms and how they might happen. I wonder if part of the reason people have attached to this is because we have so much more of an awareness of what obstacles are like for couples in real life, or, you know, people in real life, and especially in public life. And I'm specifically, as an example, thinking about how much more we know about the royal family thanks to the exposure that Harry and Meghan have given us. So so can you talk a little bit about that, and just in the context of what this romance, how this romance might speak to it in your view?
It's always been great fodder because the drama, the stakes of it, and certainly the consequence. And I think you think about like Wallace Simpson, you think like there's just, it feels like the romantic choices are become of international, I mean, it goes back to when, you know, princesses were married off to other royal families to create peace. So there is this history among political families that their romantic lives also belong to the state. And that they have like this sort of oversized, enormous impact. So I think that that's where this was such a smart setting for a story like this.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it also goes back to, I mean, all of this really hangs on casting that hero romance, right? And you have this wonderful pairing with Taylor Zakhar Perez as Alex Claremont Diaz, and of course, Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Henry. And let's talk about that. Like, what is it when you saw them? What was it in their chemistry that you said, oh yes, this is who we want to play these parts?
Yeah, I think that when you're casting, and you know, Greg and I have been very lucky to do across many genres adaptations of beloved source material. I find that it's a really intensive casting process because you realize how many expectations you bring in watching these casting tapes of what you think it is, and then it's also thinking about, well, what would Casey think? What would their opinion be? What would the fans be? What is it that is truly, because you have a book, it's more than just 120 pages of dialogue, right? You have such a deeper sense of who the character is. So we really had an extensive casting process, which we tend to do. And the first person we cast was Nick, and Nick was Greg's idea. He had seen him in something else, and he had that sort of the soulfulness. Henry is a character, Prince Henry, who Nick plays, is like very soulful, very emotional, very internal, very intellectual, very scared and afraid of the world, and feels like this deep fear that he can't be who he wants to. It's not even a deep fear, he accepts it as a truth. So we needed an actor that could communicate so much of the internal of Henry, whereas Alex is very external. You know, Alex will tell you everything he's thinking. He's been encouraged. He grew up in a very different kind of family. And so he's obviously like aware of politics. He's aware of like bigger issues than just himself, but he and Henry are such an interesting match because they're so different, but have like shared really rare experience of being in the public eye. So Taylor has that sort of gregarious, he's so incredibly sweet, he's very friendly, he's very charismatic and charming and funny, and so they're just like, it was trying to find kind of some of those core essential elements of the characters that these actors were able to access and bring to the fore. So we were lucky. And then when we finally did a Zoom chemistry reading between them, we Matthew Lopezs, the co-writer, director, executive producer, and I just kind of breathed like a deep sense of relief that like, okay, I think we got this.
Yeah. And then of course you have, I mean, I've watched so much of Sarah Shahi's work over the years. She's amazing. You also have Stephen Fry and Uma Thurman. I mean, these are some heavy hitters, and Clifton Collins Jr. I mean, all of these people. So you said you cast the leads first, and then how about bringing in these other folks?
We were just so lucky to get Stephen, and then Uma. I mean, I'm such a huge, I had a Pulp Fiction poster in my room, you know, and so the idea of Uma is such an icon, and but for Ellen, you really needed someone that you had the gravitas, the charisma, and the believability of having that kind of position of being the president of the United States and the first female president of the United States, and kind of a fierceness and a toughness, but a softness, and so I think we've just seen all of that in Uma. It's funny, we were doing like a Q&A a while ago, and Uma talked about how she wasn't, how she hasn't had the opportunity to play a good mother very often. And I was sort of like, afterwards, I was like, how dare you? The mother in Kill Bill is a great mother. Look at what she does for her kids. The kind of like badge of quality that having Uma in a supporting role brought to the film, it kind of qualified the production in a certain way. And I think we were all so excited. And then Sarah Shahi is a genius. I mean, so fun. That was Rich D'Elia, one of our casting directors, had worked with Sarah. And as soon as we started casting, he's like, this is Sarah Shahi. I mean, you guys can talk about whoever you want, but like, this has to be Sarah Shahi. And he was so right.
You were talking about Uma, and you were talking about the fact that she said this is a great maternal role. And I think this is a great time for us to throw to what is one of my favorite clips, one of my favorite scenes from the movie.
So are you gay, bi, fluid, pan, queer?
What, Mom, I'm bi.
Oh, all right. Well, you know the B in LGBTQ is not a silent letter.
Yes, thank you, Mom.
I mean, if I've had more warning, I could have made you a PowerPoint presentation, but... Can I give you some advice?
Yeah, of course.
You need to figure out if you feel forever about him before you take this any further. A relationship like this will define your life.
I don't know if we're there yet, Mom. I don't know if we ever will be.
One more thing. We didn't go over this particular type of partnering when we had the talk, which is on me for making assumptions.
Okay.
I just want to make sure you know you need to wear a condom if you're having anal intercourse.
Oh my God.
And we can talk about getting you on Truvada, and if you're bottoming, then you need the HPV vaccine, and I can have HHS send over some brochures.
You are ridiculous. I cannot believe they gave you the nuclear codes.
And you have to tell your father.
So much going on with that conversation that I just love. There's the whole connection that we see, but there's this compulsion that we see to her to rewind, to redo the talk, which is something that you would expect from someone who is running the country, making sure that all bases are covered. Can you kind of take us through like the background of how that scene, played out? The perspective.
Well, this scene really speaks also to Matthew Lopez's genius. Because what's funny is there's a line early on in that scene where it says, like, if I had more time, I could have done a PowerPoint presentation, because there is a beloved and wonderful scene that Casey wrote in the book that was sort of Alex doing, like, there was a PowerPoint presentation. And so there's a lot of talk, like, we spoke a lot about Matthew and I and Mike and Greg about not doing that scene because it was so iconic, but letting, this was the scene that the movie kind of wanted and needed, and like rhythmically this kind of quiet moment, and obviously there's comedy in it, but there's a lot of heart and emotion. And I think this, like, Matthew has talked about how he really wanted to write a character who was really comfortable and empathetic to an understanding of the specifics of being a gay man or a bi man. And you know, I think for me, the most powerful part of that scene is, I mean, all of it's beautiful and it's so beautifully acted by both of them, is when she says, "And that's on me." Because I think that so often queer youth feel this responsibility and this idea that actually it's the parents' job to meet the kid where they are, you know. And Greg actually directed the movie Love, Simon, that has an equally beautiful scene with Jen Garner, and another one with Josh, and you know, those scenes I think are so important because you're not just creating a safe space for queer youth, you're creating an opportunity for parents of queer youth to see a model of behavior that they probably, many of them, look, I'm sure many of them achieve on their own, and others don't know what the right words are. So to be given that example and to be shown what it's like to just be loved and accepted for who you are. But for me, I think that's one of the most powerful parts of that scene, is that moment where she says, "And that's on me for making those assumptions." Because I think that's what so much of the pain, you know, and there's still the mental health tax of our world not being as accepting as it should be or could be, that is placed on kids. It's just to kind of remind parents of their responsibilities and their opportunities. And so that to me was like, this whole movie is very joyful, and we made it during a very dark time in American history and in the world. And so, you know, sometimes you just want to show people the world you want to live in. And you kind of make it so, and you create that reality. So this idea of a mother whose response is like, "Of course I love you. You got to think about this because of the stakes of the situation," but also like how that was, I can't believe I just assumed. So I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and to your point, I do think that having this story within the context of a rom-com, which is that comfort, really adds to the
Yeah.
power of that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you and Greg had those conversations about not just adapting the novel and hitting the beats to, you know, to serve the fans, but also to take this moment and have a queer romance, a queer love story within this format that has for such a long time been centered on, you know, cisgender couples. Did you
Yeah.
have a conversation?
It's twofold. It's one, it's like, you know, growing up not having seen these examples, how incredible it is to create that space for the next generation and for them to feel, because look, not every queer kid's parents are as wonderful as Ellen Claremont Diaz, you know. And so it also for them, not, it's like oh look, these are the kind of parents I deserve, you know, and if I don't have them, maybe it's not my fault, maybe it's their limitations. And so but it's also just good storytelling. You know, I've been having this argument for most of my career that when you have diverse representation, that's good business. I mean, you are giving more people the chance to see themselves, which makes them want to watch. I mean, it really, to me, is so simple. It's also more interesting. I mean, how many like cisgendered white upper middle class rom-coms have we seen? And there are many that I love. And the truth is, like, the what's underneath them is a universality. But why not? But there's a universality for there's a lot of cisgendered people that love this movie and love this book, and so they can access the universality that's at the heart of it. And I think all movies and television shows at their best are giving us this kind of tapping into this universality of the human experience. But why not do it in a way that feels fresh? It's also more interesting, honestly. Like the consequences and the stakes are so real in this movie, as fun and as light as it is. There's real obstacles to overcome, and that's just fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. And I do love the fact that you do have this couple at the center and there aren't other competing romances. We just focus on them. I did want to just ask the question of, there are a lot of people who are going to be rewatching this, watching it for the first time, returning to that idea of this being a new world. We have, as you see, the first female president in your film, and we have someone who's running for that position now. And I'm wondering, as we look at this, like, does that change anything in terms of your kind of your way of approaching the movie, or your thoughts about, I say this knowing that no pop culture is predictive, right?
Right.
You just kind of
No, but I believe in, like, in the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. I do believe that we can create the world we want to live in. And if you show people it's possible, for those with less imagination, it's harder to deny it's harder to say something's impossible when you've seen it, even if it's fictional. And I think that, like, the ability to, I think storytelling creates bridges, and it taps into empathy in a way that sometimes can be harder in people's day-to-day lives. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity. So while it's not predictive, I think it's expansive. And I think it helps create it. I actually had the opportunity to meet the woman that last ran for president. And I was telling her about this film, and she said, I said, we had a female president. And she goes, oh, well, I love that. And I said, and she turned Texas blue, and Hillary Clinton said, one of my first jobs in the field was in Texas. And if every college age kid in Texas registered to vote and voted, you could turn Texas blue, and that to me was really inspiring. And it's so, for me, I'm very excited. I think though that the reason to watch this movie, if you haven't seen it, is because it's joyful. And it makes you feel good without feeling like manipulated or talked down to. It's a genuine journey that these characters that are fun to watch. And it's a glorious, gorgeous film that was really well directed by Matthew Lopezs. And all of our key crew were fantastic at their jobs. And it's a great place to go spend a couple hours, and it'll make you feel good. And feeling good is feeling hopeful, feeling joyful. These are not feelings to minimize. I think there's a real value in that. So if you had a hard day, go watch these two guys kind of try to figure out the situation, and they don't initially like each other, and they find a common ground, and they have a lot of preconceived notions about each other. And it's funny, and it's joyful, and it's heartfelt, and it's made with a lot of love and respect, and comes from Casey McQuiston's their genius mind and their heart. And so I think it's just, I think it's if you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor. And you don't have to be queer to relate to this story. And and certainly if you have, I've talked to so many parents whose kids love this movie. Sometimes they're younger than I would think would be appropriate, but they've watched it over and over again, because I think it's just showing them that they can be happy. And I think for all of us to give ourselves permission to be happy, and to see a reflection of happiness and possibility and positivity in a world that's felt dark for a long time, I think it's a really valuable addition to any conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you were saying with Casey, they completely made this beautiful story. There are characters in there that I know that you have combined and things like that. Can you talk a little bit before we kind of wind things up about that whole notion of honoring the text material to, just to make sure the fans are, are being served, and making sure that it's your own vision?
Yeah. Well, it is. It's so interesting. I've been involved in a lot of adaptations, and I will say for me, the most important audience is the author, right? So it's I did the show The Flight Attendant, and Chris loved it. It was very different, but he loved it. I think you can never capture the experience of one medium in another medium. You have to extract the essential oils of it, you know, the things that feel, you want to create the emotional experience that you felt with a book or a comic book or whatever. And so I think we're really, the good news about this adaptation was everyone involved was a fan of the book. And Matthew was a huge fan. Greg and I, Mike, our cast. I mean, we felt a responsibility to the book, to Casey, and to the book's fans, because they're really beautiful fans of this book. And so, you know, like when Nick was dyeing his hair blonde in prep, it was like he had fan art that he was showing our brilliant key hair person, Karen, of like the color he wanted it to be. So we all felt like we were bringing to life something that existed very specifically in a lot of people's minds, but you have 2 hours. It's just not as much time. So you do have to make those hard choices, and also like good on Casey, because the what you're referring to is we did combine 2 characters, and that was before the movie came out. There were some very angry tweets about that and suspicion, but I think we're the overwhelming, like the majority of people that loved the book, that watched the movie, understood and respected those differences. And again, they were done with, like, Matthew did it with a lot of thoughtfulness and respect for the text. You know, I think because he comes from the theater, there's a lot of respect for the text. And so, but you have 2 hours. You can't do everything. And what's great about that is now if you watch the movie and you love it, go read the book. There's new stuff.
So we have Red, White, and Royal Blue 2 coming.
Yes, we
yes.
are knee deep in working on the adaptation. It's been a lot of fun. Casey is co-writing with Matthew. So it's been the really fun experience, because it's interesting because there's no book to work off of, but there is Casey's own internal truth of kind of who the characters are and how they would behave. So it's been so fun to get to spend that time with Casey, being like, well, do we think Alex and Henry would maybe do this? And like, what would be an issue? And so it's been really fun and a unique development experience, because the text has sort of not been written yet. We're adapting something that doesn't exist. So it's been really fun and interesting and a challenge. And we feel, again, like this sort of tremendous responsibility, but these characters are just, the idea, look, I'm lucky enough to work on a lot of television. What's great about television, you fall in love with a character, you get to keep seeing them. So this idea that we have these beautiful, incredible cast and this like wonderful story and world that this takes place in, and we get to go back, like what a gift.
Well, this has been such a treat, and thank you so much for talking to me. And we always ask this question to finish, but in case someone hasn't had a chance to watch Red, White, and Royal Blue, is there one thing about the film that stands out for you that you would want someone to check out?
First of all, if you haven't seen it, how lucky. Now you get to watch it for the first time and join the rest of us, hopefully as a fan of the film. But I think it's about love and hope, and who couldn't use a little more of that in this world?
Especially right now. I can't wait to introduce people to it. Well, thank you so much to our friends at Prime Video and to Sarah for joining us today. And to everyone watching, thank you so much. And see you next time on Happy